My name is Claire Hart, and 3 days ago I buried my grandmother, then sat across from my father in a wood-paneled office, while our lawyer opened the envelope that would decide what love was worth. Mr. Keller's voice was steady. Mine wasn't. I could still smell church lilies. Dad adjusted his cufflinks like a man preparing for applause. I had taken a month off work to care for Grandma. Oxygen tanks, pill organizers, the monitor's soft beep at 3 a.m. I learned those sounds like a song. While Dad showed houses for commissions, I warmed broth-counted pills and kept a notebook for the nurse. Grandma called me her soldier. Steady on, she'd whisper. We finish what we start. Mr. Keller began with the practical. Funeral expenses, tax notes, personal effects. Dad half listened until the numbers arrived. To my son, Thomas Hart, he read, I leave the residence at Lakeview all investment accounts and the remaining savings. My father smiled without looking at me. To my granddaughter, Claire, Mr. Keller continued, I leave the 1968 Pontiac Catalina in the detached garage. The sentence landed like a single coin on tile, small sound, big room. I pictured the gray car under its cracked tarp and felt heat rise anyway. Dad's chuckle carried enough sugar to burn. Guess she wanted you to drive away for good, he said. Something inside me folded. Mr. Keller turned a page. Actually, he said, and the word hung like a door on a hinge. Dad's smile thinned. Before it swung open, I remembered February when the hospital wanted to keep Grandma after her second fall. She squeezed my fingers and asked to go home. I drove her past the feed store and the diner where she taught me to count nickels, then moved a cot into her room and learned the choreography of care, lift, turn, tuck. Rinse, pat, button. When she sat by the window, she told stories about ration books and a car that took them to their first apartment. One clear night I wheeled her to the porch. Do you remember the Pontiac, she asked. Only that it doesn't start, I said. She smiled. It started our whole life once. Don't look at what it is now. Look at what it points to. She patted my hand. Steady on. The road knows where to turn. In the office, the road bent. Mr. Keller slid a smaller envelope from the stack. Your grandmother updated certain filings this spring, he said. She asked me to read a clarification. He read, The Pontiac, and its contents shall pass in full to my granddaughter Claire, who alone saw me through my final season. The vehicle's papers constitute proof of associated claims and easements attached to the Hart Farm parcel recorded in 1971. My father stopped smiling. Associated what easements, Mr. Keller said. Recorded when the county widened County Road 12. They were never extinguished. We sold that boundary strip decades ago, Dad said. The strip, yes, Mr. Keller replied, not the right of access it created. The original certificate is in the glove compartment. Without that document, the claim can't be exercised. I pictured the glove box I'd last opened, hunting a flashlight. Under brittle registration and faded receipts, what else waited? Mr. Keller added, Your grandmother kept a packet with the title, A Land Lease Memorandum, a survey, and a letter of intent from a renewable energy developer. None is enforceable without the originals. She left them with the car for Claire. Dad's chair creaked. My mother wouldn't hide business from me. She didn't hide it, Mr. Keller said. She placed it where the person who cared for her would find it. The Pontiac wasn't a consolation prize, it was a key. My father knew the click of a safe and was listening for it now. There's a timeline, Mr. Keller said. The developer's letter of intent expires in 60 days. They require proof of access across the old lane which the easement provides. If Claire elects to negotiate, I'll coordinate counsel experienced in energy law. Dad stared at me like I'd wandered into his reflection. She was medicated, he said, not thinking clearly. Mr. Keller lifted another sheet. Her physician's capacity letter is attached, dated 2 months before her death. She was competent. The drizzle thickened at the window. A truck downshifted on Main Street. In my pocket, a tissue went damp. I remembered changing her oxygen cannula. She'd watched me with bright, unblinking pride. You do hard things gently, she had said. Mr. Keller closed the folder. There are personal items as well, he said. A cassette labeled, For You, a tin of photographs, a recipe box. They're in the trunk. Of the car, yes. Your grandmother wanted you to have the medal and the memories. My father stood. I'm contesting, he said. Undue influence. My daughter practically lived with her. Mr. Keller didn't stand. File what you wish. Your mother anticipated that objection and recorded a video statement. Dad's hands dropped to his sides. For a second he looked 12 caught human, then the realtor slid back across his face. I picked up my purse. Grief stayed grief even when a letter pressed it into a new shape. I nodded to Mr. Keller and stepped into the hallway's lemon oil light. At the elevator, Dad spoke low. It's a junk car, Claire. Maybe I said pressing the button. Maybe it's direction. The doors opened with a soft bell. We rode down in silence, related by blood, and divided by what blood had come to mean. Outside, rain turned to silver mist over hoods and sidewalks. In that thin weather, I understood that the lawyer's word actually hadn't ended anything. It had started the engine. Whether the road ran toward money or memory, the first turn waited under a cracked vinyl dash, where a glove box held the past in paper and the future in ink. I didn't become my grandmother's caregiver in a single brave gesture. It happened one ordinary choice at a time until the ordinary felt sacred. The first week of leave I brought the wrong soup and learned the right one lives on the top shelf by the window. By the last week the pharmacist tucked extra swabs into our bag because she'd watched me count the days between refills. The oxygen concentrator hummed and kept time. I drew a medication chart on the refrigerator with pencil lines sharp as rails. Grandma laughed. You make caring look like a mission brief, she said. Steady on, Lieutenant. I've never served, but I squared my shoulders, and she seemed less tired seeing me try. Elsie, the visiting nurse, taught me the small mercies loop the cannula so it doesn't bite, pivot from bed to chair without bruising pride, talk through pain like crossing stones in a creek one step then the next. When we mastered the pivot, we celebrated with orange slices. I can taste the grove, she whispered. On good afternoons, we sat by the window where sunlight quilted the floor. I set out her puzzle-covered bridges, red barns, a winter creek, and she turned each piece right side up with the heel of her hand, an old factory habit. Don't force it, she said when I muscled a sky into a field. Pieces that belong will find each other when you stop insisting. Hospital days smelled like sanitizer, coffee, and determination. We kept a blue tote ready, thick socks, peppermint candies, the cardigan that made cold rooms kind. I learned nurses' names, the cadence of infusion pumps, and which vending machine carried crackers that didn't taste like cardboard. Grandma thanked everyone. People straightened when she spoke as if gratitude set a steady hand at the small of the back. Nights belonged to the house and the art of keeping it gentle. I slept on a rug beside her cot with one hand on the blanket edge. When she stirred, I woke. Sometimes she asked, "Tell me something true," and I told her my coworker Ben's dumb meeting jokes. Sometimes tell me something beautiful, and I described frost stenciling the pickup's windshield at dawn. Once she wanted the creek, so I found a recording and let it run low. Food became its own stubborn language. Toast mattered, soup mattered. We tracked small victories with a pencil stub, half a sandwich on Tuesday, 2 spoons of oatmeal on Thursday, a miracle of peach pie on Friday, because Mrs. Henderson bakes with real butter and memory. On bad days it all came back, and I learned the choreography of failing forward, rinse, pat, change, forgive. She gripped my wrist and whispered, "You do hard things gently." When she had strength, we took short drives, airing out the week, she called it. I buckled the belt over the quilt on her lap and steered down County Road 12 past soybeans and the rusted mailbox still bearing our name. The Pontiac slept in the detached garage beneath a torn tarp. If I brushed the cover, I could smell the ghost of motor oil and August dust. She'd glance that way and smile like an old friend across a room. One bright Saturday, she asked to sit by the garage. I rolled her chair over cracked concrete and lifted the tarp halfway. Sun found the chrome. She touched the fender like a cheek. "First big thing your granddad bought after the war," she said. "We drove it to the fair and to the hospital when your daddy was born. I asked why she kept it when it no longer ran." She shrugged. "Some things store a tune. The car knows the truth." The worst day came like weather. Fever rolled in, pain tightened every muscle. Elsie coached me by phone while I read numbers in a voice I barely recognized. We cooled and counted and prayed. Toward morning the fever broke and Grandma slept with her mouth open like a child. The first light seemed over-eager greedy to see her. In the quiet after she began to assign tasks, clean the drawer by the stove, wrap the blue dishes for the church sale, put my recipe box in the trunk. She said trunk as if it rhymed with truth. I made lists and checked them twice. When I carried the recipe box to the garage, the Pontiac's passenger door opened easier than I remembered, like the hinge had waited for my hand. Cards rattled in the tin. We had one more porch night. Fireflies stitched the hedges. "You'll be tempted to measure love by what people leave you," she said. "Measure how they showed up." I wanted to confess my fears. The bills by the phone, the future shaped like a question mark the way Dad's voice turns to glass when money enters a room. Instead, I asked, "What if I get it wrong?" She squeezed my palm. "Steady on," she said. "Do the next right thing. The road will show itself." On her last night at home, morphine softened the edges. She slept in pieces while I sorted envelopes labeled in tidy block print, "Utilities, Insurance, Taxes, Family." A small envelope lay by itself marked with my name. Inside was a single ignition key wrapped in tissue and a note, "For when you're ready to drive." I didn't understand. I only understood the weight of the key and how my breath caught around it. When the ambulance took her the final time, I followed with the blue tote and a prayer you can only say by driving carefully. In the ER, she opened her eyes once found mine and mouthed, "Thank you." I answered out loud, "Gratitude deserves sound." After she was gone, the house still held her shape. I made tea and sat at the table where we had counted pills and blessings. The key lay between my hands. Through the window, the garage roof shone with dew. The road beyond the hedges pointed the same direction it always had, but the map inside me shifted like a puzzle piece, finally sliding into place. I didn't know yet what the Pontiac carried, only that it had turned from junk into a compass I could feel more than see. Rain stopped in the night, and morning arrived clean. I unlocked the detached garage and breathed dust oil in summer. The tarp sagged with storm water. I dragged it off. The Pontiac blinked at the light like an animal roused from hibernation. Up close, the Catalina still held dignity, chrome trim, long hood, a bench seat made for Sunday drives. Rust mapped the wheel wells. A spider had strung web between mirror and door. I brushed it away and kept going. Grandma's key sat warm in my pocket. Thin and ordinary, it felt heavier than it should. I slid into the driver's seat. The vinyl crackled. A faded St. Christopher card drooped above the visor. I turned the key. No engine, no lights, but the radio coughed a breath of static before dying. The glove box resisted. On the third try, it surrendered and spilled a nest of papers, registrations, insurance cards, gas receipts from stations that no longer exist. Under the pile lay a manila envelope tied with red string. In Grandma's block letters, "Papers for Claire." Inside, a copy of the title, a county map creased like a scar, an embossed certificate labeled "Easement of Ingress Egress Hart," and a letter from Horizon Prairie Renewables LLC. I unfolded the map. A red X marked where our land touches the old lane, cut when the county widened Road 12. Pencil arrows pointed to Ditch Gate, then a dotted trail through the back pasture. Beside the X, she'd written, "Lane survives" in paper. "Show them." EMH. Horizon's letter was a non-binding letter of intent. They proposed a site assessment for a small solar array at their cost, followed by an option if vehicular access could be proved across the interior parcel. Without proof of access, no deal. The easement certificate looked like proof, but what did I know? My hands went cold. At the bottom of the envelope waited a smaller one. "Mr. Keller for safekeeping, delivered to Claire." I slid it. A second key fell into my palm, square-shouldered, tagged trunk. The tag listed contents, photographs, cassette recipe box, survey memo. "Keep together." I looked at the ignition key in the slot, the trunk key in my hand, and the long bruised body of the car between them. I had the past and the door to the past. I didn't have the nerve to open it alone. I texted Dad a photo of the Pontiac. He replied in seconds, "Don't get attached, junk is still junk." I tucked the papers into their envelope and locked the glove box. By noon, I drove the pickup down County Road 12 to find Grandma's red X. The road shouldered the fields with that Midwestern posture, practical and endless. I turned at the old mailbox, still painted heart. The lane existed if you knew where to look, 2 faint ruts parted by grass, a memory of gravel, a chain slung between posts. A weathered county notice flapped on a stake. I walked the line, counting steps. Birds worked the fence. Soybeans breathed. Through a break in the hedgerow, I saw the barn roof peeled boards silvered like old coins. The dotted path on the map became a footpath under my shoes. I followed until the ground told me to stop. Looking for something, Mr. Dillard from 3 parcels down leaned on his fence. "Just checking boundaries," I said, showing the map. "Family things." "Always are," he said. "That lane still means something on paper. Your grandma used to holler, 'One day the county will remember what it promised.'" She was usually right. I thanked him and let the lane draw a line in me. At the chain, I considered unhooking it just to feel the weight give, then left it linked. Some openings should happen with a witness. Back home, I ate a sandwich over the sink. Grief likes meals that don't sit down, then returned to the garage. The Pontiac smelled like a room kept closed since a wedding. I slid the trunk key from my pocket. It fit my fingers as if they'd practiced. The lock turned with a small metal word that had waited too long. The lid rose on a careful whirl. Grandma had packed the trunk like a nurse packs a drawer tidy, labeled ready. The recipe box with its dented corner sat beside a shoebox of photographs tied with twine. A cassette in a plastic case read, "For you," in her neat hand. Under them lay a thick envelope, survey and memo. Another larger held a rolled document with a county seal peeking from the edge. I stopped. Not from fear, though fear braided through it, but from reverence. I wanted Mr. Keller to see what she had done. I wanted a witness for the way love plans and files and makes room for proof. I closed the trunk softly. The key came out. Evening threaded the hedges. At the kitchen table where we'd charted meds, I set the papers for Claire envelope and called Mr. Keller. I found documents in the glove box and items in the trunk. I said to his voicemail, "I'd like to bring the car to your office or have you come here, whatever keeps the chain of custody clear." Dad called next. "We need to talk about listing the Lakeview house," he said. "Market's good. I'm busy tomorrow," I said. "Doing what?" "Opening a trunk," I answered, and let silence end the call. I made tea, set 2 cups, and poured one into the empty chair because habits don't surrender on command. Before bed, I wrote a short list. Call tow truck. Meet Keller. Buy cassette player. The ordinary act of bullet points steadied me. When I turned out the light, the Pontiac rested in the dark, like a patient instrument waiting for a steady hand. Morning would bring the tow, the lawyer's office, and whatever the word actually had invited into our lives. For now, the car slept. The house breathed, and I held the map inside me, feeling the road sharpen from memory into direction. The tow truck driver whistled when he saw the Catalina. "Haven't hauled one of these in years," he said, looping chains with the care of a paramedic. I rode behind him to Mr. Keller's office, watching our past travel on steel like a dignitary under escort. We parked out back by the alley door where he kept clients with delicate matters away from Main Street eyes. Mr. Keller met us with a clipboard and cotton gloves. "We'll treat this like an archive," he said. "Photos first, then removal." He snapped pictures of the closed trunk, the lock, the keys in a plastic bag. The ritual calmed me. Grief respects procedures. Love does too. He opened the trunk and inhaled softly. "Your grandmother could have run a museum." We carried the boxes into his conference room. Sun made bright squares on the carpet. I laid out the glove box envelope title, Copy Map Easement Certificate, Horizon Prairie's letter. Mr. Keller read line by line, a pencil ticking once in the margin when something mattered. "Here," he said, tapping the easement. "Recorded in 1971 when the county took a sliver from your east boundary. They owed your family ingress and egress over the interior lane in perpetuity. Most folks forget these survive when land trades hands. Your grandmother did not." "She told me the road knows where to turn," I said. She meant it, he replied, and she documented it. He dialed a number. Janine, can you step in? A woman in a navy blazer entered with a satchel and calm eyes you want near fire. This is Ms. Pike, he said, energy and land use attorney. I keep her on my speed dial when paper meets dirt. Ms. Pike gloved up like a surgeon and examined the documents. The easement's clean, she said. Meets and bounds match the old survey. The letter of intent is standard non-binding contingent on legal access and environmental assessment. Their clock runs 60 days from acknowledgement. Have they acknowledged receipt on your end? Not yet, I said. I only read it yesterday. Good, she said. We'll control the start date. She unrolled the big tube and aerial plat with our parcel outlined in yellow. They want a small solar array community scale, she said. 2 to 5 megawatts likely on the south pasture. Rent rolls in annual payments escalators for inflation option to extend. It won't make you rich in a day, but it's steady, predictable income. If they later decide to expand, they'll pay for that privilege. Her finger traced the dotted lane. Without this, you'd be at your neighbor's mercy for access. With this, you are your own neighbor. What about the farm we sold? I asked. Dad said we gave up the edge years back. You sold surface dirt, she answered. You didn't sell what paper preserved. Easements are promises written in the ground. Counties forget, documents remember. Mr. Keller handed me a cassette player from some back closet of miracles. For when you're ready, he said, touching the tape labeled, for you. We can listen together or you can take it home. I left the tape on the table. Later I said, I want to know what I'm holding before I hear how she says it. As if summoned by the past, my father's voice came from the doorway. Holding what he'd skipped the receptionist and walked straight in like a man entering his own kitchen. He took in the unrolled survey, the easement, the neat rows of labeled envelopes. His mouth thinned. You should have called me. I did, I said. You told me junk is junk. His gaze fell to the cassette. She's got you playing with toys while grown-ups handle real property. Thomas Mr. Keller said evenly, your mother made her intentions explicit. We're confirming the legal strength of the documents Claire inherited. Inherited, he said, tasting the word like it might be spoiled, from a woman on morphine. Competency letter is here, Ms. Pike said, tapping a page. Dated 2 months pre-death. Lucid-oriented and cognizant of consequences. She was manipulated, he fired back. By who, I asked. The neighbor who baked the pies, the nurse who taught me to loop the cannula, or by me who changed her sheets and recorded her pain scale. He looked at me the way he looked at sellers who asked too much flat calculating sure they'd come down. You don't understand the complexity here. Then help me understand, I said. Sit down and listen like you would at an inspection. Ms. Pike pointed her pen at the plat. Here's the simple version, Mr. Hart. Your mother's car holds original proof that keeps an old promise alive. That proof gives Claire leverage to negotiate an access-confirmed lease with a reputable developer for clean power on underused pasture. Done right, it provides stable income to your family for decades. No one's selling your father's legacy. We're stewarding your mother's. Something worked behind his eyes, the part that knows a good contract from a trap, the part that once swung a hammer before he carried keys on a silver ring. What's it worth? He asked quietly. In money, she said. A few $100,000 over 20 years, maybe more. In control, it's priceless. Without the easement, you'd have to beg a neighbor or abandon the idea entirely. Your mother didn't leave her granddaughter a car. She left her a steering wheel. He flinched as if she'd struck him not because it hurt, but because it named something he'd hoped had no name. Why Claire? He asked. I kept the business running. I paid the taxes. I handled the hard conversations. I could have told him the hard conversations weren't always at a closing table. Sometimes they were at 3 a.m. with a thermometer and a prayer. But I swallowed the sermon. Maybe because I stayed, I said. Maybe because staying is also a way of paying. Mr. Keller folded the letter of intent. The practical steps, he said, moving us from feeling to action like a good pastor at the end of a sermon. We'll notify Horizon that Claire's counsel has acknowledged receipt and will respond within 30 days. Ms. Pike will begin title verification and confirm the easement at the recorder's office. Claire, you will not remove any original from our custody. Everything lives here under lock until copies and scans are made. Dad shoved his hands into his pockets, a boy with nails hidden in his fist. "And me?" he asked. "You can help," I said, surprising both of us. "Your eye for contracts is good when you aren't angry. Sit at the table without calling me a child, and we might get this right." He leaned on the chair back. For a second he looked like the man who lifted me to see fireworks above the fairgrounds grandstand. "She always loved that car," he muttered almost to himself. "Your mother hated the way it guzzled. Your grandma called it our ship, said it knew the way home without a map." I pressed play on the cassette before I could change my mind. A little hiss then, her voice raspy, steady, more herself than any photograph. "Claire, if you're hearing this, the car let you in," she said, and I had to grip the table. "Your daddy thinks value lives in deeds and dollar signs. He isn't wrong. He's just not complete. This car carries paper that points to a promise the county made. It also carries something I can't file, a kind of compass, only time can read. You have both kinds of sense, dear. Use them together." She laughed, my favorite sound. "If your father is in the room, tell him I left him plenty and a chance to be proud of you. Pride is different than possession. He knows the difference even when he forgets." I stopped the tape there because tears blur legal descriptions. Ms. Pike pretended to recap her pen. Mr. Keller looked at the easement like scripture. Dad cleared his throat. He didn't apologize. Men like my father don't love that word. But he did a thing rarer. He sat. "What's first?" he asked, not as a realtor, not as a rival, but as a man who had finally decided to help carry a thing because it was his to carry. "First," Ms. Pike said, smiling into her notes, "we make copies. Then we take your mother's promise to the courthouse and remind the county how paper remembers." Grandma's car waited out back, empty trunk yawning like a mouth that had finally told the truth. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and cassette tape plastic. It felt like church. Not the kind with pews, the kind where someone says exactly what you needed to hear and then hands you a plan. By Friday, my father had new business cards for his anger. He arrived at Mr. Keller's office with a sharp-faced attorney from Columbus and a second man who carried a tablet like a scalpel. They didn't sit. They arranged themselves. The sharp-faced one introduced herself as Ms. Rowan and spoke in a tone that made every sentence sound pre-approved by a judge. "We're contesting on the grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity," she said, and clicked her pen, as if that settled the past. Mr. Keller folded his hands. "Noted," he said. "You're welcome to file whatever you believe is proper." Ms. Pike slid the competency letter across the table. Ms. Rowan skimmed, frowned, and set it aside without comment, already planning new routes around an inconvenient fact. Dad didn't look at me. He examined the ceiling crown molding like a man appraising trim he planned to rip out. They left with copies that were not originals and confidence that felt borrowed. When the door closed, the room sagged like a tired lung. Mr. Keller exhaled. "They'll try noise first," he said. "Noise is cheap." Noise found me before supper. At the grocery, Mrs. Whitmore from choir stage whispered near the grapes, "Heard you're making a fuss over the will. Terrible business suing your own father." At church, a deacon with permanent Christmas spirit patted my arm and counseled forgiveness for things I hadn't yet been allowed to name. In the diner, two contractors glanced up from meatloaf and made long, slow eye contact, while my father told the waitress family's complicated loud enough to carry across pie. I kept a strip of paper in my pocket and wrote facts, so rumor had something to bounce off. Fact easement recorded in 1971. Fact competency letter dated 2 months pre-death. Fact originals in custody. Fact horizon letter is non-binding. We control the clock. It didn't stop the ache. But the list turned the ache into work, and work is the rope I know how to climb. At home, I cleaned the Pontiac like a rookie curator, bucket mild soap soft brushes. I swabbed chrome and read my reflection in dull silver until it agreed to shine. In the back seat I found a hairpin, a church bulletin from 1989, 3 pennies that had gone dark with time. I lined them on the garage shelf like proof that small things persist. The trunk's careful world remained undisturbed. The cassette rested on my kitchen counter beside a mug, and the sort of courage that comes slowly. I pressed play after dark. The tape hissed, then her voice came clearer than the day she passed. "If you're listening at night, you're my girl," she said, making the kitchen gentler. Night is for telling the truth without rushing. I braced for instructions about signatures and seals. Instead, she told a small story about the year the river iced so hard, they drove the Pontiac across it to take blankets to a neighbor whose furnace died. "We brought heat in a trunk," she said, amused. "Don't let anyone tell you trunks are only for luggage." She paused and I could hear her breathe. "If he mocks you, let him," she said, then plain as a recipe. "Time will show who truly loved and who just wanted." I pressed my thumb to the counter until the edge bit. The sentence slid into me and locked. The next morning, my father's lawyer filed. The petition used words that sounded like they had washed their hands susceptibility isolation procurement. I recognized myself in none of them, but words can be trained to point, and theirs pointed at me. The clerk stamped the date. A hearing set itself like a storm on the county docket. "Dad called that night. 'You've made this adversarial,' he said, as if he'd tripped and I'd moved my foot. 'It could have been solved quietly.'" "It can still be solved quietly," I answered. "Sit down with Ms. Pike and read what paper says instead of what you wish it said." He shifted into a tone I knew from open houses. "You're out of your depth." "Maybe," I said. "Depth is where the water keeps the good fish." He hung up with a snort that tried hard to be laughter. I set the phone face down and washed dishes until anger softened to something that could be put to bed without breaking the plates. The town kept watching. Mrs. Henderson, who baked the butter pies, appeared at my porch with a casserole and news I hadn't wanted but needed. "People are saying you hypnotized your grandma with kindness," she said, rolling her eyes so hard they nearly cleaned the siding. "Honey, if kindness hypnotizes, this whole county would be asleep." Hypnotizes. I laughed for the first time in days. "Will you come to court? Just sit behind me and look like home." "I'll wear my better cardigan," she said. "The judge respects a cardigan." Ms. Pike turned my fear into mechanical steps. "We'll file our response, attach the competency letter, and request admission of the cassette," she said. "Bring the recipe box to show provenance of the trunk's contents. I've subpoenaed the county recorder to confirm the easement was never extinguished. We'll also tender expert testimony that the letter of intent is standard. Your father's counsel will bluster. We will not." "Do I speak?" I asked. "If asked," she said, "say what is true and stop when you're finished. The court respects sentences that end." I practiced ending sentences while I vacuumed. It's harder than you think. The day before the hearing, Horizon Prairie's project manager called to touch base. She spoke like a person who had learned patience the hard way. "We saw the filing," she said. "We remain interested. We prefer families that can sit in the same room without fire, but we've worked with rain before." "Thank you," I said, and meant more than thanks. That night I listened to the second half of the cassette. "You'll want to win fast," Grandma said. "Win right instead." Then she did a thing that ruined me and made me steady at once. She prayed for my father by name. Not fancy. 5 sentences and an amen that sounded like a door clicking shut kindly. When the tape clicked for real, the kitchen felt full. Morning put on its courthouse clothes, humid air, short sleeves, and pew-like benches, a bailiff with a voice made of oak. My father arrived in a suit darker than his mood. Ms. Rowan whisked papers like cards. The tablet man glowed faintly. Behind me, Mrs. Henderson's cardigan radiated approval. Mr. Keller nodded hello. Ms. Pike moved our evidence trays like a librarian with a deadline. My father watched me without expression. If he was frightened, he hid it. If he was ashamed, he ironed it. When the judge entered, we rose to our feet, and the room became a place where words must earn their keep. They made their opening a daughter too involved, a grandmother too medicated, a car too convenient. Ms. Pike made ours a woman who planned carefully an easement that outlived memory, a tape that spoke with a voice no one could counterfeit. Somewhere between those stories sat a judge who would decide which grammar belonged to love. I did not look at money numbers or calendar clocks. I looked at the St. Christopher card I had brought from the visor and tucked into my pocket, not as superstition, but as a reminder that travel is sometimes standing exactly where you are while a storm moves past. When the gavel tapped a short recess, my father finally met my eyes. He didn't speak. He just looked, and I saw the boy who once held a sparkler too close to his wrist, and wouldn't admit the burn. I thought of Grandma's prayer and decided some victories are chosen long before a judge signs them. We reconvened. The court recorder adjusted her machine. The judge lifted a page. Somewhere down Maine, a tow truck groaned to life. In the hollow between accusation and answer, I heard my grandmother again win right. I straightened, folded my list of facts once more, and waited to tell the truth when it was my turn. The judge returned with the worn calm I'd seen in good teachers and tired paramedics. "Let's keep this simple," she said. "Ms. Rowan, proceed." Dad's attorney offered suspicion dressed as concern. She said susceptibility, decompensation opportunity. She painted me as a gate around my grandmother, locked from the inside. When she moved to admit pharmacy printouts, Ms. Pike stood. "Your Honor, we stipulate to medications," Ms. Pike said, "and tender the attending physician's competency letter 2 months pre-death confirming capacity for complex legal decisions." The judge read, nodded, and kept it. "Call your witness," the judge said. They called a distant cousin who remembered what helped him. He claimed Grandma sounded foggy at Thanksgiving. Under cross, Ms. Pike slid him a photo from that night, Grandma leading Grace, eyes bright, posture straight. Foggy, Ms. Pike asked. "Maybe not that night," he muttered. "Next witness." The tablet man took the stand, a consulting gerontologist credentialed mostly in confidence. He had never examined my grandmother. He had read summaries. "Doctor, can you diagnose competence from a grocery list and medication log?" Ms. Pike asked. "No. So your testimony is speculation." "A professional opinion," he said, deflating. "That'll do," the judge said. "Recorder's office," Ms. Pike requested. The county recorder arrived with bound volumes and the pleasure of telling the truth. He testified to the 1971 taking the recorded easement and no extinguishment. "Ingress and egress over the interior lane survives," he said. "Recorded here and reaffirmed in the 1994 replat." "In practical use, the lane faded, correct?" Ms. Rowan asked. "Ink doesn't fade because ruts do," he said. The judge smiled, noted. "Next Horizon Prairie Renewables," Ms. Pike said. A woman in a field jacket over a skirt suit confirmed the letter of intent, project scale, and the condition of legal access. "Without the easement, not feasible," she said. "With it, we can responsibly site a 2 to 5 megawatt array with community benefits and payments indexed for inflation." "This is speculative," Ms. Rowan said. "Hopes?" "Models," the woman replied. "If the economics fail, the project dies on our paper before it lives on anyone's pasture." "Your offer expires when?" the judge asked. 60 days from acknowledgement. We have not received formal acknowledgement." "Wise," the judge said. Then it was my turn. I swore in with hands that remembered night shifts and orange slices. "Did you live with your grandmother?" Ms. Pike asked. "I stayed nights," I said. "Days too, when she fell. We had help. I wasn't a wall. I was a daughter." I described the chart on the fridge, the porch airings, the recipe box placed in the trunk at her request. I told the truth and stopped. The court reporter nodded like a metronome. Ms. Rowan rose. "You stood to gain from isolating her, didn't you?" "I stood to lose her either way," I said. "I chose to lose her gently." "Isn't it true she gave you the car so you would find the easement and leverage it?" "She gave me the car because I showed up. What it held was her doing. My doing was being there." "Why didn't she tell your father?" "Because he counts before he listens," I said, meeting Dad's eyes without triumph. Mr. Keller played a portion of the cassette. My grandmother's voice filled the courtroom, raspy, warm, unmistakably herself. "If he mocks you, let him. Time will show who truly loved and who just wanted." A deputy wiped his eye. Dad stared at the table as if numbers might rescue him. We rested. The judge stacked papers. "I find the testator possessed testamentary capacity at the time in question, and no credible evidence of undue influence has been presented. The bequests stand." She turned to the recorder. "The easement lives, it lives." "Then the court recognizes the easement's validity. Counsel may proceed accordingly." Dad's shoulders dropped. He looked older, not ruined, simply the age he was. Ms. Rowan squeezed his arm. He looked at me instead. "Anything further?" the judge asked. "Yes," Ms. Pike said. "Please note the parties' intent to collaborate on lease negotiations in good faith and to refrain from disparagement while talks proceed." That's not an order, the judge said, but it is good advice. Families shouldn't set themselves on fire to keep strangers warm. Gavel a tap like a nail set flush. In the hallway's lemon oil light, Mrs. Henderson's cardigan arrived before she did. You told the truth and stopped, she said into my hair. Your grandmother would approve. My father waited by the water fountain, hands in pockets, posture without script. She talked about driving across the river the winter it froze, he said, as if we were in a DMV line. I know, I said. She put heat in the trunk. I don't like losing, he said, almost apologizing to the air. We didn't make you lose, I answered. We made a promise win. He breathed like laying something heavy down. What happens now? Paperwork, I said. Together if you can manage it. I can manage it, he said. Before adjourning, the judge explained herself in plain language that felt like a porch light. Capacity is not the absence of illness, she said. It is the presence of understanding. The physician's letter, the recorder's testimony, and the decedent's own recorded words paint a consistent picture. This court respects planning done with a clear head and a clear heart. You could feel the room unclench. As we gathered our exhibits, Horizon's representative offered a small nod. When you're ready, we'll walk the boundary together, she said. Bring boots. It sounded less like business and more like neighborliness, which I suddenly understood was a kind of contract, too. On the steps, I called Mr. Keller back to thank him. He waved it away. You did the hardest part, he said. You stayed, and today you spoke. Paper helps, but character carries. His words landed like tools in a tidy box, useful, reachable enough. Outside, the sky had the generous blue of a day that decided not to thunder. A tow truck hummed past, empty bed shining. I slid the St. Christopher card into my pocket and felt for the first time since the will the shape of a road that didn't hurt to follow. We met at the farm the next morning, ready to listen. Horizon's team parked by the hedgerow and shook hands. Dad arrived a few minutes late, carrying coffee for everyone. He stood quietly while the project manager flagged sun angles, and drainage asked 2 smart questions about runoff, then said, "Thank you," like he meant it. We walked the south pasture grasses, brushing our knees. The numbers turned the field into a ledger written in sunlight, megawatts, offsets, lease increments. I kept hearing Grandma's sentence, "win right," and tried to translate it into clauses that wouldn't bruise anybody later. The easement made the path possible. Patience would make it sustainable. At the boundary, the project manager said, "We can draft 3 versions: straight purchase, pure lease, or a hybrid. Given your family dynamics, I recommend a hybrid with an upfront payment to settle immediate needs and a royalty that grows gently." She looked at Dad. "Gently usually survives holidays." He smiled. "You people speak fluent Thanksgiving." We looped past the barn. Dad stopped. "Your grandma used to stand here and decide supper," he said. "If the wind smelled like rain, it was soup. If it smelled like cut hay, it was pancakes." He glanced at me. "You're not the only one with memories." "I know," I said, "but I'm the one with the key." He nodded. "And I'm learning to share the wheel." The deal came together because the recorder's ink was older than our arguments, and because everyone decided not to be clever. We signed a hybrid, a solid upfront payment for taxes, repairs, and a cushion Grandma would have approved, royalties indexed to real costs, a promise to restore the land when the panels come down. Ms. Pike added a clause that made my throat tighten: community scholarships funded by a small percentage of net revenue in Grandma's name. When the wire hit, the number startled me less than the quiet that followed. No scramble, just the unfamiliar feeling of enough. I hired a contractor to fix the farmhouse roof and asked Dad to oversee the work. He brought a worn clipboard, and the crew started calling him Sir. He stopped dressing like a closing and started dressing like a project. We restored the Pontiac on weekends, which is to say we learned to be in the same room without repairing each other. I polished chrome while Dad labeled baggies with a neatness that once belonged to real estate packets. When we finally turned the engine and it caught, Dad laughed like a man who'd forgotten he could. I drove slowly down the lane. He walked beside the fender with his palm on the metal, the way you touch a shoulder to say, "Keep going." I kept Grandma's cassette on the passenger seat. On cool nights, I played it through a little speaker and let her voice ride shotgun while the fields turned navy and porch lights clicked on down County Road 12. "Measure how they showed up," she'd say. Then pride is different than possession. Each time Dad reached for the volume and didn't turn it down. Horizon poured footers, set posts, and lifted panels with the choreography of a barn raising. Neighbors stopped with questions, some honest, some barbed. "Does it ruin the view?" one asked. "Depends what you're looking at," I said. "I see tuition and a roof that doesn't leak." The library announced its first scholarship recipients in spring, a welding student named Cruz and a CNA named Melissa, both from our county. One Sunday in May, Mrs. Henderson organized a modest dedication. We set up folding chairs by the edge of the array. No speeches, just stories. The preacher read a psalm about light. The Horizon team brought lemonade. Dad handed me a small envelope with my name in his square handwriting. Inside was a check for the exact amount he once spent on an attorney retainer. "Bad investment," he said. "I'd rather put it here first, scholarships." After the crowd drifted away, we took the Catalina into town for pie because some endings should taste like cinnamon. We parked on Main where Grandma used to angle in Proud and Crooked. People waved. A teenager in a letter jacket asked what year the car was, and Dad launched into a history that surprised him mid-sentence. He caught my eye and shrugged as if to say, "I didn't know I remembered this much." I shrugged back, I didn't know either. That night we sat on the tailgate and watched the panels turn their faces to sleep. I thought winning meant owning, Dad said into the soft. "Turns out it means tending." He looked older and better. "I was wrong about you." "I was loud about you," I answered. "Loud isn't the same as right." He took a breath like setting down a stubborn bag. "Thank you for staying," he said, which arrived like rain on a dry field. We didn't hug. We are not a hugging family. But we let the silence be kind, and that felt like new language. On Grandma's birthday, I drove the Catalina to the river and parked where the ice once held a car and courage. I set the cassette on the dash and spoke so gratitude could hear itself. "We brought heat in a trunk," I said. The water kept its counsel. The wind smelled like cut hay. Pancakes, I decided, laughing alone, then not alone at all. If you've listened this far, you know the math we learned: money keeps score, love keeps time. If someone has mocked your share because it didn't look like theirs, I hope this helped you measure differently. Consider who showed up when showing up cost something. Consider what promises the paper kept and which promises only a steady hand could keep. If this story touched a memory in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear they weren't foolish for caring. Leave a note about where you're listening from. Tell us who taught you to win right. And if you want more stories like this about families' repairs and the quiet courage it takes to stay, please subscribe. Your listening helps keep these roads open.